Listen, it is my favorite day of the week because this is the day where we're talking about the big pop culture stories right now. This week, the big news around here is the return of Bridgerton. The first part of season 3 just came out. The group chat is here. They're ready to dive in, so let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, there's a lot to talk about today, like this new Amy Winehouse biopic just came out. Critics are not on board. And I'm interested in this because I feel like with this sort of rush of biopics about famous musicians, I feel like critics have kind of been taking it kind of easy on these movies. But this movie is not getting a pass. It is getting the cold reception kind of right at the gate. We're going to get to that in a moment. But first, we are going to start with something that all of us around here are excited about. And that is the first part of Bridgerton Season 3. It just came out. Jael Richardson is here. She's really pumped. I can tell. Jael, welcome to the show, friend. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I can see that you're just like ready to talk about Bridgerton. This is the energy that you're bringing. Leila Latif is here. Louise Bruton is here. And I'm excited that you're all here. Welcome to the show, everybody. How are we feeling? Hello.
Great.
I'm loving it. Loving the feminine energy.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's go. Let's get into it. Listen, Bridgerton is, we should tell people, for people who have not seen Bridgerton yet, it's set in London's Regency era. It's all about the marriage market among the wealthiest families. I'm told it's known as the Ton. I don't know a lot about this world because it's not where I live, okay? But every season focuses on a brand new romance, and this year it is Penelope Featherington, which is an insane name, and I want to come back to that in a moment, and Colin Bridgerton. That's their love story. Let's hear a little bit about Penelope and Colin, also known as Pollen.
If a husband is what you seek, let me help you.
Help me how?
I was in 17 cities this summer, and what I have learned is that charm can be taught.
Colin, I cannot have you with me whispering into my ear in every ballroom.
You will not need that. We will have lessons, and you will quickly master them, I'm certain. There is nothing more I want than to earn back the favor of the one person who has always truly made me feel appreciated. Are we not friends?
Friends.
Jael, I can see. First of all, I can see you reacting as you watch this, as you like listen to that clip. Second of all, this is the first time they've done a friends to lovers sort of trope. How are they handling it? Are they doing all right with this?
I love a friends to lovers trope. Love it.
I see that about you. I know that about you. Go on.
I love it. It's hard to do. It's hard to do well. It's
Yeah.
hard to set up believably and make it actually like turn into something that you're actually rooting for. I think the benefit is they've also sort of set this up in previous seasons. We've seen Colin and Penelope. We kind of know that they're friends. We kind of knew it was coming. And so it feels like this very timely, I'm going to use the word climax to their relationship. But I love a friends to lover trope. I think they did a really good job in the beginning episodes of this section. You sort of think like, has Colin changed in a way that we're not going to like? But then you sort of see this depth to him in later episodes where he has a really nice transformation. So I do really enjoy it. I think the one concern I did have was it felt like there were many storylines. Like they have like 4 eligible Bridgertons right now. And so it's sort of a bit of chaos. It actually doesn't really start with Penelope's focus. It starts with Francesca, one of the other sisters. So I felt like there was a little bit of like a lack of centering of Penelope and Colin at times, but I am so here for their relationship and for the arc and for Colin's growth.
First of all, let me just applaud you for 3 minutes into the conversation using the word climax, first of all. Second of all, I appreciate that. I appreciate the idea that like this is a bit more of a sprawling Bridgerton season. And I say this as someone who like has not closely followed the show. I started like Bridgerton kind of passes by me. It kind of happens to me. It's around a lot and it's on a lot, in my house, but I don't follow it very closely. Leila, when you think about the show, how are you feeling about the Penelope and Colin relationship? Like, is it working for you? Is it getting you to root for it in any kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are both, we have heritage and family from the Sudan, and that is our background. And like, I would say that like this feels so Sudanese to me. The way where it's like a kind of not that exciting trash dude gets like a very wonderful woman interested in him after like many years. Maybe it spoke to a few existing traumas of mine, but like I don't know that I'm rooting for it because I feel like I spent my whole life trying to not do this. But yes, not gonna lie, they have great chemistry. Nicola Coughlan is absolutely phenomenal.
Yes.
Maybe brought up some stuff from me from my past, but like, generally for the most part, can root for this love.
This is my favorite conversation. Sudanese men catching strays on the radio this morning. Why not? Let's go.
I don't know what you guys are doing. Like, just like
Colin deserves
you don't
some
deserve
strays
us.
too. Colin deserves some strays for some of his actions. So fair.
No, I love it. I love that we're getting really deep into it. Louise, okay, you're just getting into Bridgerton this season. Are you buying this Pollen, which is a ship name for Colin and Penelope? Are you buying this ship? Are you buying this relationship?
So I jumped in just at season 3. I watched the first 3 episodes last night, and then the final episode of this part of the series this morning.
Oh wow! Okay.
And yeah, from what I gather, correct me if I'm wrong, Penelope just seems to hide behind hedges and look at Colin a lot. There's a lot of longing glances across rooms, a lot of unsaid words, which I think in TV shows you need a few spoken words. And
welcome to Sudan.
There's just a lot of, breaths being taken away and eyebrows being arched and just coquettish looks across the room.
Yeah.
So the charm and the chemistry, I did not see that. But
okay.
But that's me jumping in so late into a very much adored series that I have actively avoided for the last 4 years.
Okay. I love that you were like, I kind of tried to avoid the show because like I a little bit same on this front, but it's kind of gotten to the point where it's like a little bit unavoidable. So here's what I know, Jael, is that like Penelope is the kind of character who's had this arc as the ugly duckling, of the town. Like she doesn't really get picked. She has a reputation as a bit of a spinster. And then you kind of get to this moment, she's pulling the strings as like the anonymous writer behind a gossip column, Lady Whistledown. But then you get to this place where she's having a swan moment. Do you believe her swan moment? Do you watch this and go like, yeah, I'm on board?
Yeah, I mean, I think even to go back to what Louise was saying, I think if you watch just this season, it would be hard to get an appreciation for Penelope because I think a lot of her great moments happen in seasons 1 and 2, where she is this undervalued, cared for kind of. Her mom is a bit of a loose cannon that kind of ruins and makes her dress in these very like juvenile ways that get mocked. And so I think one of the complaints I have about Penelope's like sort of swan moment in this season is I feel like they kind of over exaggerated her ugly duckling. She's done all these really incredible things behind the scenes and she comes in this very like horrible dress. Like it's just obviously hideous. And then she sort of decides she's going to get a makeover. So she gets this makeover and everyone's like, ooh, but the reality is she's still like super awkward. And I thought that was like the really most interesting storyline is that even as she sort of emerges, she still like can't quite roll with it in the same way she's so fluent and eloquent in her gossip column. So I thought that they like overplayed that like ugly duckling transformation. Now she's beautiful. Now everybody's paying attention to her. I thought that like literally could have been cut out.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the ways in which Penelope, the later episodes of this section were much stronger, and the earlier seasons for Penelope are much stronger than certainly episode 1 and even parts of episode 2.
Lately, you brought up Nicola, and like let's talk about this moment in Nicola's career playing Penelope, because like there's so much excitement for the 3rd season because she's the star of it. How did she get here? Like, why do you think people are so happy to see her in this place?
Well, in the UK, she's very, very beloved as a star of Derry Girls. But also, I think that she does have a very broad range in that she is a very, very funny character, but also somebody that's able to do quite sensitive work, sensitive dramatic work. And as a result, like people do very much connect to her. One of the things that I love that they did in the TV adaptation and they did, which was not present in the book, is that they didn't make it that the the gal loses loads of weight and
Mhm.
has a very small waist and is all of a sudden that's why. It's about her confidence. It's about the fact that she actually, over the course of the series, discovers that like being herself is a very compelling person.
Mhm.
And yeah, with her suitors, it turns out like the thing that is actually going to attract to them, even this very, very rigid form of like what a good wife is, that
Right.
she's going to, fall in love because people actually like her for her.
Louise, do you want to talk about this moment in Nicola Coughlin's career? Because like I'm just fascinated because again, this is an actor that I'm not sure I anticipated would end up here, and then people seem really excited to see her in this place.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch from the Irish perspective because 2020 was a big year for her immediately getting this international spotlight on her because we had Dairy Girls about a year before you guys did on Netflix
Yeah,
when it was airing
a flex,
on
but
Channel.
okay, love a flex.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
we had her for a while, and then she between Bridgerton and Dairy Girls both being these internationally broadcast shows on Netflix.
Yeah.
She was a new name to you, but she only had small acting bit parts before that. So it really was this huge explosion. And just like Leila was saying, there's comedy, there's drama. She is starring in a great show at the moment as well called Big Mood, which is about the kind of the complexities of living with bipolar disorder and going against the grain and not taking your medication. And in that role, she captures kind of the frenzy, the hilarity, the desperate lows as well. And she does it with this particular kind of sensitivity that we haven't seen in her in Dairy Girls or in, I presume, Bridgerton, because, season 3.
Yeah.
But it is incredible. And then her as a person, she's a great advocate for the LGBT community. She's very vocal. She's just an advocate for justice. And she was one of the few artists in an international stars to sign the Artists for Palestine campaign as well. So she takes risks.
That was my
you know.
campaign. But yes,
Oh, no way.
yes, no, she came on very, very early. She's a wonderful advocate for the rights of the disenfranchised.
Yeah. I have really loved watching the way that people are rooting for an actor like Nicola because, like, again, she has played the kinds of roles where you don't necessarily see those characters becoming so central to a show, but then she kind of makes every role that I've seen her in, but that's so far 2 of them. But so you're right. I have some more familiarity, for me to like sort of more work for me to do in terms of like getting more familiar with her, with the rest of her work. Jael, I want to ask you, listen, the first season of the show, of Bridgerton, was kind of famous for its very steamy sex scenes. Second season, a lot less explicit. What is the spice level of season 3 so far? How are you feeling?
Okay, well, the problem I have is I watched this on an iPad, fairly big iPad, in a plane next to 2 strangers. So for me, it feels uncomfortably high still,
Like no matter what. Yeah.
I was like leaning forward, like shoveling my arms around the screen, so in terms of spice level, I'm also notoriously like an old lady / child when it comes to sex scenes. Like just give me enough. Just long enough.
Yeah.
So I think that this one is far more tame in the first 4 episodes.
Okay.
They were short enough that I didn't have to lean forward for too long, except for one. I was deeply uncomfortable and was like, I think I'm just gonna shut it down. But yeah, I think it's milder than previous seasons. It's still got enough for those that like it. But if you really like it and really want it, you may be hoping the last 4 episodes provide a little bit more juice.
What are you anticipating for part 2, Jael?
Okay, so my questions with part 2 that I'm a little bit concerned about is how they're going to wrap all these storylines up. Because I'm actually not just invested in Penelope and Colin. There are actually some other storylines that I think are really interesting, and they've done some interesting things. To be honest, there are literally 5 different Bridgerton relationships, if you count them. One's a non-one, but
That's
5 family members that are like kind of pursuing relationships. And I'm concerned that 4 episodes is not long enough to wrap them up satisfyingly. And so I'm looking forward to a solid pollen finale, like friends to lovers, wrap it up, let's go.
Yes.
Complete it up. But I'm also trying to figure out how they're going to satisfy me in some of the other relationships that are kind of starting up.
We're going to wait and find out because the rest of the season comes out next month. If you're just joining us, my name is Alamin Abdul Mahmoud, and Jael does not want to wait for this long.
No.
This show is called Commotion.
To be satisfied.
All right.
Delayed satisfaction.
Okay. It might be too early for puns. It might be too early where I am for puns, but I will accept it coming from you guys. Let me just tell people that this show is called Commotion, and right now we just had a conversation about Bridgerton. We've also had a rash of music biopics over the last several years. You know, there's been the Elvis movie, the Leonard Bernstein movie, Freddie Mercury. And then the latest, Back to Black, is about the life of a generational talent.
Meet you downstairs in the bar and her. Your rolled up sleeves in your skull t-shirt. You say, what did you do with him today? And sniff me out like I was Tanqueray.
Come on, that voice. You know I'm no good, Amy Winehouse. There's a new biopic about her life called Back to Black. Amy was a 6-time Grammy winner, an artist who defined a generation with that voice, her songwriting, her style, especially in the UK. Amy died at 27 of accidental alcohol poisoning. She was very open in her music about dealing with addiction, with abuse, with disordered eating. Leila, we arrive at this movie. This movie comes out. You know, Amy still has this very large and very loyal fan base, and it isn't just her fans who are slamming this new biopic. You know, there's so much vitriol, there's so much hatred for this movie. The internet really seems to hate it. Is it as bad as the internet suggests it is?
It's worse.
Oof. Oof. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's so much worse. I'm someone who knew Amy a little bit. Like, we weren't we wouldn't call us friends. They're kind of maybe like warm acquaintances. But we are the exact same age. I think our birthdays were like a couple of days apart. She was a once in a generation talent who was able to create art, which I think genuinely like shaped my entire generation.
Mm-hmm.
She was someone that was very accessible. Like you could just go and kind of hang out with Amy, to be honest. You could just head to Camden and she'd be there. And Asifkapedia made like an incredible documentary about her. I think we
Called
all
Amy
as a
a few
city,
years ago.
as a generation, as a city, as a generation, we mourned Amy in a really profound way because she was a wonderful light in the world. And Asifkapedia's documentary did in some way capture that. And I think that this documentary is biopic is an abomination, and I think everybody involved should be deeply ashamed, and I would only hope that they would let this wonderful human and profound artist kind of rest in peace.
I appreciate how definitive you are. You're like, there's nothing sort of redeeming about this. Can you just talk a little bit about what you think, what went wrong with the movie? Like what are some of the problems with this movie?
So, I mean, like as a film critic, like there is something that like always makes our like kind of like the hairs kind of like prick up on our skin where we've like, oh, the estate have given their rights to the songs for this. And that normally means that there is then that they are going to have a little bit of a say-so in terms of like how everybody is depicted and all of those things. And that is what leads to your kind of Bohemian Rhapsodies. And it's not necessarily a disaster because like Elton John was involved in
Rocket Man.
In Rocket Man, which I actually think was pretty good.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the time it's all about kind of like, well, if we're going to give you the rights, you have to make everybody look pretty good. And it's very depressing in the case of Amy, who her entire life was exploited. Her estate has gone to a family which, as we see in Asifkapedia's in Asifkapedia's documentary, you know, maybe I can't blame them entirely. Like, I mean, how can you even deal with that situation?
Sure.
But didn't perhaps do all that one would have hoped for a woman under an immense pressure, but also a woman with an immense talent. And what we end up with is a film that is all about a woman that is like sad that she can't get married and have a baby. And like her artistry and her genius is just like not acknowledged. And I think that's like a despicable way to portray the legacy of Amy, who,
Yeah.
I didn't know her very well. I knew a little bit, but I adored her.
The genius is enormous. The way that Amy wrote songs, the way that she used her voice as an instrument, just incomparable. Louise, when you watch this movie, what's the most egregious part of the film for you?
Well, the thing that really bothered me was there are so many monumental moments of Amy's life that we have seen on television, we've seen in interviews, but in trying to provide some background on her, there's a lot of imagined conversations where they're trying to provide more depth to the relationships that we already have some sort of headline or tabloid insight into. And just like Leila was saying there, some of the characters end up the film ends up sympathizing with them, and these were in her real life the baddies, and they should have to an extent been the baddies in the movie as well. And the one scene in particular really bothered me, apart from the opening scene, which is showing Amy writing a song, and I think that's when the first eruption of laughter began in the cinema, because it was just such an unbelievable way of seeing someone write a song. It was just, I don't think they consulted with many musicians in creating this in this movie.
Oh no.
But there was one scene where she goes on a date with Blake, and it was just they went to the zoo, and the only reason that they went to the zoo is so that Amy can see a lioness, and she can say the line, "I want to be a lioness," because Amy's posthumous album is called Lioness. And it was a very long scene where nothing in the plot actually happens, but they just wanted to have a link to the zoo, which isn't, I don't know, just not a very unimportant event in her life and most people's, to connect it to the posthumous album that she had no say in being released. So
Yeah.
I feel like there was a lot of insensitivities going towards her story and just manipulating and reducing who she was as a person.
I'll hear
But
a lot of
even Louise,
anxieties. Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Leila. Go ahead.
So I was just saying that even Louise, I was very distressed that there is a moment in the film where she essentially writes the film Valerie, which is, anybody who knows anything about Amy and Mark Ronson, was a cover.
That's a cover. She did not write that song.
It's just it's so lazy. It's so lazy.
Jael, here's the part that I'm interested in. I'm interested in the idea of all of our attention focused on all of these biopics about musicians, right? And we talked about Elvis, about on Maestro, Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody. Timothy Chalamet has been photographed literally everywhere in New York shooting this Bob Dylan biopic. We can sort of conceive of some of the compromises that the filmmakers have had to make in order to tell these stories. And we kind of go this is clearly not going to be the full story. And some people are going to want to make themselves represented pretty well in these films. And yet we still go. So what do you think the appeal is for us to participate in these parts of the mythology? Do we just want the simplest version of the story on screen? Is that what you think is going on?
No, I mean, I think that we are curious about these celebrities.
Yeah.
We know them from these very carefully curated moments. They go to an award show. They're shot by the paparazzi. They go into these moments that we see, and we want to understand what was happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think especially when you have someone who dies tragically or whose life sort of turns in a direction you didn't necessarily see coming as the audience, you're deeply curious about what went wrong. I remember watching the biopic of Whitney Houston and realizing, this relationship she had with a woman that she wasn't allowed to sort of pursue or engage in. And suddenly the choices she makes about Bobby Brown, you start to put together things. And honestly, as an audience member, you start to question, what was my part in all that? What are we doing as audience members? So I think there really is something powerful about these films in sort of reflecting back the problems with media, the problems with PR, the problems that we place on these artists that we idolize. But I also think there's this weird and very dangerous slope when it comes to posthumous biopics that are being handled by other people to sort of either preserve the identity of the artist or preserve their machine, or to preserve themselves, family members who are taking part, producers who are taking part, who can want to continue to make money off this artist who has passed away. So there's a very complicated dynamic in these films that can both be helpful and exposing what's gone wrong and what we need to do differently, but also that can continue to feed the beast that actually led to their demise in the first place.
I hear that. I hear that as an anxiety about the way that we think about and protect artists' legacies, and I'm really grateful for this conversation. I also, unfortunately, got to leave it there, but I appreciate all your time. Thank you so much for showing up to this conversation. This has been a delight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Hey, yeah, of course. Jael Richardson, Louise Bruton, and Leila Latif. Listen, Jael Richardson is the author of Gutter Child, The Stone Thrower. Leila Latif is a critic for Total Film, The Guardian, and other publications in London, England. Louise Bruton is a culture critic in Dublin. My name is Al-Amin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We are going to be back next week. And you know what? I'm going to see you then.